Dr. Mark Goldenberg is a chiropractic neurologist who specializes in the treatment of learning disabilities, dyslexia, attention deficit disorders, and spectrum disorders. He is the director of the Brain Balance Achievement Center in Norwalk. Thanks, doctor, for coming up and joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here, Lori. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about the approach that your center takes in dealing with children with autism that perhaps is different than other doctors.
Well, our approach in all children with neurodevelopmental disorders is that the Brain Balance Centers are supplemental learning centers that focus on children with the whole spectrum of neurodevelopmental disorders: autism, ADD, dyslexia, OCD, Tourette's. And what we really do is we try to optimize and improve function in these children. We look at the basic problem with these kids, which is what we call a functional disconnection in the brain. And what that means basically is that as humans, both sides of the brain in a human brain do completely different things from a processing standpoint.
Yeah, we've heard about right and left sides of your brain.
Exactly, and that's what happens in autistic individuals, but only that's the right side of the brain in an autistic individual is functioning at a much lower level. Okay. So it's like if you took two computers, one a new dual-core processor type of computer, another kind of Windows 95 computer, and tried to put them together. Nothing is really broken, but they're processing at different speeds.
Okay.
And in autistic individuals, this right side of the brain is not processing. So at Brain Balance, what we do is we target the right hemisphere and do many, many different activities in sensory types of activities, motor activities, cognitive activities, dietary types of change to increase the processing of that hemisphere and then get both hemispheres to link up, reconnect, and this improves attention, behavioral types of aspects, decreased negative behaviors, decreased impulsivity, improved social interaction.
Right, because I read, when I was reading, looking at your website rather, it seemed almost like a tutoring service to an extent.
Well, actually, tutoring is not really the right way to approach it. It's more of strengthening neurons in the brain. And we know through a process called neuronal plasticity, meaning that the brain can change and improve with appropriate stimulation, that by stimulating nerves appropriately in the appropriate sequence with exact stimuli and having those stimuli be progressively challenging, those nerves could actually grow and get stronger and start connecting to other areas of the brain so that the child now has use of all parts of their brain.
So give me an example of how you might do that.
Well, what we do is through an initial assessment, which is an assessment that we do to look at sensory detection systems, processing systems in the brain, motor systems, cognitive systems. We might stimulate their brain through the auditory system, through the eyes, through the visual system, through the eyes, through the auditory system, through the feeling touch system, through balance, coordination types of activities, through cognitive activities that just stimulate one side of the brain. So we use a lot of different environmental stimuli, academic stimuli to target one side of the brain and get that processing at a higher rate.
And you work with these children, obviously I guess every child would be for a different amount of time, but how long are you working with them continually?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, our program is a 3-month program. It's a 12-week program. We see kids 3 times a week. They come in for an hour each session, and each session we're stimulating multiple areas of sensory areas, motor areas, cognitive areas. So we're getting all these areas stimulating at the same time, which is the difference between this program and many other programs, because we're getting the whole brain to coordinate all at once, which is what separates human brains from all other brains. We're able to coordinate large areas of the brain all at once.
So in other approaches, they concentrate on one?
Yes, for example, you might go to an occupational therapist who'll just work on balance. You might go to a speech therapist who'll just work on speech, or an audiologist who will just work on hearing. But at Brain Balance, we realize that the brain needs all of these stimulations to be stimulated with the child all at the same time so that all areas could start communicating and synchronize appropriately.
And what kind of successes have you had?
It's a good question. We just came out with our first outcome study published in the International Journal of Adolescent Medicine and Health. We took 60 kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, put them through our program. 82% no longer met the criteria for ADHD at the end of our program.
Wow.
And these results are not only in ADHD, but they're across the board in all types of neurodevelopmental disorders.
So is it a 3-month program that then the caretakers or the families learn what you do and continue that treatment at home, or is it 3 months and then?
We do most of the bulk of the work in the center. We give parents activities to continue to nurture the brain after we are finished, because these children are still going through growth phases in their brain.
Right.
So it's important. For some reason, they have developed an inability for these areas to communicate. So after we're done and the brain is balanced and communicating appropriately, the parent still has to nurture these children. The school system still has to fill in the gaps that these children have had. So there's a lot of ongoing work.
And one of the primary things that you'll see if you look at the website is you say that you are brain-based, not drug-based. Why is that an emphasis?
It's an emphasis because we know that when you give a child drugs, what you're doing basically is you're working on a specific symptom. Once those drugs are taken away, the symptom comes right back. What we're trying to do is grow more connections, grow more neurons, strengthen neuronal connections, which drugs do not do.
Are we learning more about ways to treat autism and about autism every day?
Absolutely. The more research that comes out, the more we realize that the old approaches to autism, which were strictly a brain-based genetic problem, we now realize that autistic types of disorders and the whole spectrum of disorders are not genetic, because there's never been shown to be a broken gene or a deleted gene, but more environmental factors are affecting the way genes express themselves. And when we realize that the environment plays a big role in how the brain develops, then there could be more chances for a treatment and a cure to these disorders.
Interesting. And give me an idea, because parents who are watching will want to know, how much does this kind of treatment cost?
Well, the hallmark of our treatment is an initial assessment. That's a 3-day assessment where we look into, excuse me, sensory detection systems, motor detection systems, coordination systems, cognitive systems. That 3-day assessment is $295. Okay. We sit down with the parent, and for the very first time, we speak to these parents in a way that they've never seen their child before, because we're talking about their functional neurological systems in their child's brain, not just giving a diagnosis, but showing where these areas are weak. And then the 3-month program is a $6,000 program, which, various types of payment plans or various types of ways that a parent could pay for that.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for telling us. It's very interesting. I know that autism certainly is a focus for a lot of people nowadays. Thanks very much to Dr. Mark Goldenberg of the Brain Balance Achievement Center, and that's in Norwalk. Do not forget, if you missed something here on The Real Story, you can now watch it online by going to fox61.com. On my bio page, there is a link to the segments. You can also catch us on YouTube. Thanks for watching this week's edition of The Real Story. We'll see you here again next week.